Kalamazoo is home to a shrine of sorts, a shrine for guitar lovers around the world. The famous Gibson guitar was first built in Kalamazoo and turns 100 this year. WOTV 41's Bert Mosley tells us why the old Gibson Guitar Factory is a national landmark.
The final part of our story of Gibson and Kalamazoo is the long legacy of guitar making that followed the 1984 plant closure. Many former employees went on to long careers making stringed instruments, performing difficult repairs and restorations, and passing on their knowledge to the next generation of luthiers. First and foremost among these was Heritage Guitar Incorporated, which simply continued to make guitars right there in the same building and on much of the same equipment. 4 former employees, Jim Durlew, J.P. Moats, Marv Lamb, and Bill Page, leased the basement floor of the original 1918 factory, purchased some of the equipment that Gibson was leaving behind, and proceeded to build their own line of solid body, semi-hollow body, and custom-carved archtop guitars that all echoed the Gibson instruments they had made for so long.
I had the opportunity to go to Nashville. Yeah, I had the opportunity. They wanted me to move into Nashville even then, and everything, and I still wouldn't go. I said, no, I'm staying. I'll take my chances and do it. But we had decided that what we were going to do is what we knew how to do best. We were going to try to build guitars. So we come up with a name of Heritage, and we just kind of done our own thing, and we moved into this building, like I said, April 1st, and then incorporated. We probably moved in a little bit before that, but we incorporated April Fool's Day 1985. And we've been doing it now, 27 years. Yeah, so I've been doing this for 56 years, long time.
You got it figured out yet?
No, you never figure out guitar building.
A small operation, Heritage handcrafted thousands of guitars in much the same manner that vintage Kalamazoo guitars had been made. This authenticity is exactly what many enthusiasts seek. A Heritage guitar, made in Kalamazoo, right there in the factory, by former employees using vintage techniques, makes more sense to some players and collectors than buying any other modern guitar, which can be attested to by the popularity of the Heritage Owners Club. In fact, during the early years at Heritage, Durlew, Moats, Lamb, and Page, and their small staff were able to produce many custom-carved instruments for which Gibson, now resettled in Nashville, lacked the expertise.
The Gibson guitar isn't made here anymore. The operation moved to Nashville 10 years ago. But this is still a guitar factory. J.P. Moats built Gibson guitars for nearly 30 years. Now his factory turns out 1,500 Heritage guitars a year. He says it still takes a steady hand to make a quality instrument.
It takes a lot of skill to build guitars. It's to get the sound and to get them to note true and all that stuff. It's some pretty critical work into it.
This place is magical.
Wild Bill Durkin moved here from New York to be near the guitar factory. He calls it a labor of love, the job of turning this place into a recognized national landmark. In Kalamazoo, Bert Mosley, WOTV 41 News.
Tomorrow, Gibson guitar enthusiasts will gather to dedicate the factory as a National Historic Landmark. In a few months, it's expected to be included in the National Register of Historic Places.
More recently, Heritage Guitar and the historic building it occupies were purchased by international investors who plan to preserve both modern guitar making and the physical building on the north side of Kalamazoo. Meanwhile, dozens of former Gibson employees either went on to work with Heritage Guitar or else struck out on their own. Aaron Cowells, for example.
And just for folks who don't know, Aaron is the proprietor of Aaron's Music Service in Vicksburg, Michigan.
Pete Moreno turned the basement of an old schoolhouse in Oshtemo, Michigan, into his famous guitar clinic. Abraham Wechter moved into an old building in nearby Paw Paw, Michigan, where, for several decades, he manufactured Wechter guitars before moving on to build custom guitars overseas. Moddy Moore, an engraver with Gibson starting in 1962, has continued to do custom work for numerous guitar makers out of her home workshop.
UPS, they deliver it to me, and I do the engraving, and if they want some truss rod covered, mother of pearl truss rod covers cut, I cut that, and if they want them personalized, I still personalize them, and so I have parts setting in my shop right now. But I never knew anything about engraving and inlay work until I worked there at Gibson, so I'm very appreciative of the Gibson Guitar Company. It's been my life.
As layoffs mounted in the 1970s and 80s, some Gibson employees just found other jobs. Yet many continued to feel a bond with their time at Gibson, whether through friendships with former coworkers or through the degree of pride they carried with them from having worked there.
This guy's eyes just got big, and he come tearing out there, "Gibson, where did you get that shirt?" And I said, "Well, I used to work there." And he said, "Oh man," he said, and he whips this thing back, and there's a Gibson guitar, you know. And people who play instruments probably think that there's nothing like them. Gibson made some beautiful guitars. I mean, they were, the finish on them and everything was, they were just beautiful. You know.
Well, you get instruments sent from all over the world, I guess, wouldn't you?
I got to meet a lot of people that way, and even met like Les Paul and Merle Travis, different people like that. I worked on Merle's, yeah.
I wanted
a couple
to.
of his.
Now, was that the big Super 400 with the long Bigsby
He
tobacco
brought that in
sunburst?
once where the rim was cracked all the way around just about. And he was pretty hard on guitars.
I bet he was.
And he left it there to be repaired, and while it was being repaired, they gave him a bright red, I remember it was a Super 400. And they had me put a Bigsby on it for him before he left.
And that was the long Merle Travis
Yeah, I don't
Bigsby
remember
with
if
the
he
ring.
put that one on, but we had him put it on there, had me put it on there, and he was going to Canada for the weekend to do some fairs. Because I'll never forget, this was a brand new guitar. And he went to Canada, he come back the next week, about a Wednesday, I think, because he wanted his single coil pickups in there.
Being P90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I looked at the back, and then it was just all
Belt
scratched, and I
buckles.
thought, boy, I really like his playing, but I don't think I want him playing my guitar.
Well, you know that guitar that you talk about that you repaired is now in the Country Music Hall of Fame, as I understand. Yeah.
I did the final setup, you know. The repairmen did the rim work and stuff.
Was he playing round wounds or flat wounds, you remember?
There were also numerous businesses that thrived in proximity to Gibson that have continued to play a role in the music industry. Proco shared space in the old factory with Heritage for decades. Former Gibson president Ted McCarty bought Bigsby vibratos and built its Kalamazoo line on the east side of town for years. And Dean Markley, American Winding, and GHS have produced millions of sets of strings in the greater Kalamazoo area. And today, a new generation of guitar makers is keeping the tradition of guitar innovation and production alive. In addition to Heritage Guitar hiring new and many younger employees and training them in modern factory production, Kalamazoo is home to several luthiers who learned their trade from former Gibson makers and continue to employ both vintage and modern guitar making techniques. Steve Cowells has taken over his father's shop in Vicksburg. Rye Charters of Caltone studied with Abe Wechter and Jim Derlew before starting his own business. Each fretboard festival finds dozens of makers with similar stories roaming the halls of the Kalamazoo Valley Museum and reconnecting with a type of social cohort that likely exists in only a few places on Earth. And guitar makers have stories to tell.